The radio crackled with static across Fob Meridian as the sun bled orange across the Afghan horizon. Staff Sergeant Rodriguez pressed his headset closer, straining to catch the fragmenting transmission from Bravo Team. What he heard made his blood run cold. All air support is down. Repeat, all air support is down. The voice belonged to Chief Petty Officer Marcus Kane, leader of SEAL Team 7's Alpha Squadron. Kane never panicked. Never. His voice carried the weight of 15 years in the teams, operations that existed only in classified files, and a reputation that made even Delta Force operators nod with respect. But now, pinned down in a valley 20 clicks northeast of Kandahar, surrounded by insurgents who had somehow anticipated their every move, Kane sounded like a man watching his team die. The mission had started as routine intelligence gathering. 4 SEALs inserted under cover of darkness to investigate reports of a high-value target coordinating attacks from a compound nestled between 2 ridgelines. The terrain was a natural funnel, defensible but with limited escape routes. It was supposed to be surgical. Get in, gather intel, extract before dawn. Instead, they'd walked into what felt like the entire Taliban waiting for them. Rodriguez toggled through every frequency, his fingers dancing across the communication array with practiced desperation. Apache gunships, grounded for maintenance. F-16s, diverted to a priority engagement near Kabul. AC-130 Spectre, mechanical failure detected during pre-flight. The entire theater's close air support had seemingly evaporated when Bravo Team needed it most. The irony wasn't lost on anyone in the Tactical Operations Center. The most elite fighting force in the world, men who could infiltrate anywhere, eliminate any target, adapt to any situation, were about to be overrun because the sky had abandoned them. Through his night vision scope, Kane could see muzzle flashes erupting from every conceivable fighting position. The insurgents had turned the valley into a killing field. "We've got maybe 30 minutes of ammunition left," came Kane's next transmission, each word measured against the backdrop of automatic weapons fire. "Request immediate close air support. Any platform, any ordnance." Rodriguez felt the weight of impossible responsibility. 4 of America's finest were about to become casualties of logistics and timing. He'd already contacted every available asset within a 100-mile radius. The answer was always the same: negative, unavailable, redirected. The board showing aircraft availability looked like a Christmas tree of red lights. But then something impossible happened. A single green light flickered to life on his screen, an aircraft identifier he hadn't seen in months. The call sign read Reaper 27. Rodriguez blinked, certain he was seeing things. According to every database, every flight manifest, every operational order he'd reviewed in the past 6 hours, there were no A-10 Thunderbolt aircraft available for close air support in his sector. The emergence of Reaper 27 on his screen felt like watching a ghost materialize from digital ether. Rodriguez keyed his microphone with trembling fingers. "Reaper 27, this is Fob Meridian Tactical Operations. Confirm your status and availability for immediate close air support mission." The silence stretched like a held breath. Every person in the operations center had stopped what they were doing, all eyes fixed on the radio speaker. Finally, a voice emerged from the static, calm, professional, with an unmistakable confidence that seemed to fill the room. "Fob Meridian, this is Reaper 27. Single ship A-10C, full combat load, currently inbound to your sector. I'm available for immediate close air support." The voice belonged to Captain Lysander Reaper Thorne, though Rodriguez didn't know that yet. What he did know was that this pilot sounded different from the usual hotshots who flew fast movers. There was something measured about her voice, something that suggested she'd seen situations like this before and had never lost her cool. Chief Kane's voice cut through on the emergency frequency. Any station, this is Bravo Team. We are danger close to being overrun. Request immediate air support, any platform, any ordnance. We have 4 souls on site. Good guys are marked with infrared strobes. Rodriguez felt his heart hammering against his ribs as he coordinated the handoff. Reaper 2-7, I'm handing you off to ground control. Call sign Bravo Actual. They're in contact and need immediate assistance. Copy that, Fob Meridian. Reaper 2-7 switching to ground control frequency. The professionalism in Thorne's voice never wavered, but Rodriguez caught something else, a subtle intensity that suggested she understood exactly what was at stake. 4 American lives hung in the balance, and she was their only hope. The A-10 Thunderbolt II that Captain Thorne piloted was a machine built for exactly this scenario. Officially designated the Warthog, it was the antithesis of sleek modern fighters. Ugly, slow, and absolutely devastating in close air support situations. Its twin engines mounted high on the fuselage, its distinctive profile unmistakable against any sky, and its GAU-8 Avenger 30 cannon capable of firing 3,900 rounds per minute of depleted uranium shells. This was an aircraft designed around its gun, built to fly low and slow, to get intimate with the battlefield in ways that fast movers never could. As Thorne approached the valley, she could see the muzzle flashes erupting like deadly fireworks across the ridgelines. Her heads-up display painted the terrain in stark detail, and her trained eye immediately began cataloging targets and identifying the most dangerous positions. Somewhere down in that valley, 4 SEALs were fighting for their lives, and she was the only thing standing between them and a body count that would make headlines. Bravo Actual, this is Reaper 2-7. Thorne's voice came across Kane's radio like an answer to prayer. I'm 5 minutes out from your position. Can you mark your location with infrared strobe and give me a target description? Kane pressed himself deeper into the rocky outcropping that provided his only cover as bullets sparked off stone inches from his head. The infrared strobe attached to his helmet cast an invisible beacon that only aircraft with proper equipment could see. Reaper 2-7, good guys are marked with IR strobe in the valley floor, approximately center of your target area. Bad guys are in elevated positions on both ridgelines. Estimate 40 to 60 fighters with small arms, and what sounds like at least 2 heavy machine gun positions. Thorne's A-10 crested the ridge at 8,000 feet, and suddenly the entire battlefield spread below her like a deadly diorama. Her night vision systems painted everything in stark green detail, and she could immediately see the tactical situation. The SEALs had been caught in a textbook ambush, pinned in the valley floor with insurgents holding the high ground on both sides. It was a killing field designed to channel any rescue attempt into the same trap. Bravo Actual, I have visual on your IR strobe. Can you identify the most immediate threat to your position? Thorne's voice remained steady as she began her attack run, the twin engines of her Warthog growling like mechanical thunder across the valley. Kane risked a glance at the ridgeline to his east, where he could see the distinctive muzzle flash of a PKM machine gun that had been keeping his team pinned for the past 20 minutes. Reaper 2-7, we've got a heavy machine gun position on the eastern ridgeline, approximately 200 meters northeast of our position. That's the one that's been keeping us from moving. Eastern ridgeline, 200 northeast, copy, Thorne responded as she rolled into her attack run. The A-10's nose dropped toward the earth, and she could see the machine gun position exactly where Kane had described it. Her targeting system locked onto the position as she lined up for her first gun run. Bravo Actual, keep your heads down. Gun run inbound. The sound that erupted across the valley was unlike anything the insurgents had ever heard. The GAU-8 Avenger cannon mounted in the nose of Thorne's A-10 unleashed a 2-second burst that sounded like the earth itself tearing apart. The distinctive BRRRRRRRT of the 30 cannon echoed off the valley walls as 130 rounds of depleted uranium shells turned the machine gun position into smoke and scattered debris. The massive recoil actually slowed the A-10's forward momentum, testament to the raw power of the weapon system. Thorne pulled out of her dive and banked hard to the right, already scanning for her next target. "Bravo Actual, Eastern machine gun is neutralized," she reported with the same professional calm she might use to order coffee. "Give me your next priority target." Kane felt a surge of hope for the first time since the ambush began. The suppressing fire from the eastern ridgeline had stopped completely, and he could already see his team beginning to shift positions to take advantage of the reprieve. "Reaper 2-7, you beautiful angel, we've got multiple fighting positions along the western ridgeline. They're dug in pretty good, but they're what's keeping us from reaching our extraction point." Thorne banked her aircraft around for another attack run, this time targeting the western slope where she could see muzzle flashes erupting from at least 6 different positions. The insurgents had prepared well, with interlocking fields of fire and covered positions that would have made this valley a death trap for any conventional ground assault. But they hadn't planned for an A-10 pilot who could put ordnance exactly where it needed to go. "Western ridgeline, multiple targets, I see them," Thorne responded as she rolled in for her second gun run. This time she planned to use her Maverick missiles, each one a precision-guided munition capable of taking out hardened targets. "Bravo Actual, this next run is going to be a little louder. AGM-65's inbound." The Maverick missiles streaked from beneath the A-10's wings like guided lightning, each one tracking toward a different fighting position along the western ridgeline. The explosions erupted in sequence, orange blooms of destruction that lit up the night and sent shockwaves rolling across the valley floor. When the smoke cleared, the western ridgeline had gone silent. Kane looked around at his 3 teammates, Rodriguez the radio man, Thompson the medic, and Jackson the breacher, and saw his own amazement reflected in their faces. In less than 5 minutes, this A-10 pilot had turned a hopeless situation into a manageable tactical problem. "Reaper 2-7, that was outstanding work. The western ridge is quiet. We're beginning movement toward our extraction point." But Thorne wasn't finished. Her trained eye had caught something that the ground team couldn't see from their position in the valley floor. As Kane and his team began their tactical movement toward the extraction point, Thorne maintained her orbit above the valley, her sensors scanning for any remaining threats. Her experience in close air support had taught her that ambushes like this rarely ended with the obvious positions. There were always secondary threats, backup plans, and reserve forces waiting to spring their own traps on unwary rescue teams. Her infrared sensors detected what looked like vehicle movement approximately 1 click north of the valley, heading directly toward the SEAL's planned extraction point. 3 vehicles, moving in tactical formation, with what appeared to be additional fighters preparing to cut off any escape route. The ambush had been planned with multiple phases, and Kane's team was walking directly into the second trap. "Bravo Actual, this is Reaper 2-7. Thorne's voice cut through Kane's tactical radio as he led his team through the rocky terrain toward their pickup zone. "I've got eyes on 3 vehicles moving toward your extraction point from the north. Looks like company coming to meet you." Kane halted his team immediately and dropped to a firing position behind a cluster of boulders. Through his night vision scope, he could see dust clouds rising from the desert floor approximately 800 meters to their north, vehicles moving fast across terrain that should have been empty. The ambush had been more sophisticated than they'd realized, with a blocking force positioned to prevent exactly the kind of escape they were attempting. "How many packs do you estimate in those vehicles, Reaper 2-7? Kane asked, though he already dreaded the answer. His team had expended more than half their ammunition dealing with the initial ambush, and they were in no condition to fight their way through a fresh force of insurgents. Thorne adjusted her sensors for a closer look at the approaching vehicles. 2 appeared to be technical vehicles, pickup trucks with heavy machine guns mounted in the beds. The third looked like a larger transport, probably carrying additional fighters. Her thermal imaging showed heat signatures consistent with at least 15 to 20 personnel total. "Bravo Actual, I count 2 technicals and a transport vehicle." Estimate 15 to 20 personnel total, and they're moving fast toward your extraction point. Kane felt his stomach drop. His team was caught between the rocky valley behind them and a superior force ahead of them, with limited ammunition and no other air support available. The extraction helicopter wouldn't arrive for another 20 minutes, and there was no way they could hold their current position against that kind of force in open terrain. Reaper 2-7, can you engage those vehicles before they reach the extraction zone? Kane asked, though he tried to keep the desperation out of his voice. Thorne was already rolling into position for an attack run on the vehicle convoy. Her A-10 carried a mixed load of ordnance specifically designed for this kind of target, Maverick missiles for precision strikes, and her 30 cannon for close work. The vehicles were moving across open ground with no cover, making them ideal targets for an aircraft designed to destroy armored vehicles. Bravo Actual, I'm beginning my attack run on the vehicle convoy now. Keep moving toward your extraction point, but be prepared to take cover if any of them survive the initial strike, Thorne responded as she lined up her first Maverick missile on the lead technical vehicle. The infrared seeker locked onto the engine block, and she squeezed the trigger. The missile streaked across the desert night like a falling star, covering the distance to its target in seconds. The explosion when it impacted the lead vehicle sent a pillar of flame and smoke rising into the darkness, and the technical vehicle disintegrated in a shower of burning debris. The other vehicles immediately began evasive maneuvers, but Thorne was already tracking her second target. Her second Maverick found the rear transport vehicle, which exploded with even greater violence than the first target. The blast suggested it had been carrying ammunition or fuel, and the fireball rose high enough that Kane could see it clearly from his position 800 meters away. That left one technical vehicle, which had stopped and was attempting to bring its heavy machine gun to bear on the A-10. Thorne rolled her aircraft into a gun run, diving toward the remaining vehicle with her 30 cannon spooling up to firing speed. The Technical's crew managed to get off a few rounds from their mounted machine gun, green tracers arcing harmlessly past her aircraft, before the GAU-8 Avenger responded with devastating effect. The 2-second burst turned the pickup truck into scrap metal and ended any threat from the blocking force. Bravo Actual, all vehicles destroyed. Your route to the extraction point is clear, Thorne reported as she pulled out of her dive and resumed her protective orbit above the valley. Kane felt a mixture of relief and professional admiration as he led his team toward their pickup zone. In less than 15 minutes, this A-10 pilot had single-handedly neutralized what should have been an overwhelming force and turned certain death into a routine extraction. He'd worked with air support before, but never with anyone who could read a tactical situation this clearly or execute with this level of precision. Reaper 2-7, outstanding work, Kane transmitted as his team reached the relatively safe ground of the extraction zone. I don't know where you came from, but you just saved 4 lives tonight. There was a brief pause before Thorne responded, and when she did, Kane caught something in her voice he hadn't heard before, something that suggested this wasn't just another mission for her. Bravo Actual, glad I could help. It's what we're here for. As Kane set up security around the landing zone and waited for their extraction helicopter, he found himself looking up at the A-10 that continued to orbit protectively overhead. The aircraft's distinctive silhouette was barely visible against the star-filled sky, but its presence was reassuring in a way that went beyond tactical considerations. Somewhere up there was a pilot who had risked her own life to save his team, flying alone into a hot landing zone without hesitation or backup. The extraction helicopter arrived exactly on schedule, a Black Hawk that settled into the landing zone with practiced efficiency. As Kane and his team loaded aboard, he keyed his radio one final time. Reaper 2-7, this is Bravo Actual. We're aboard the extraction bird and departing the area. Thanks for keeping us alive tonight. Bravo Actual, this is Reaper 2-7, Thorne's voice came back immediately. Safe travels home. It was an honor to work with you." As the Black Hawk lifted off and headed back toward Fob Meridian, Kane watched the A-10 bank away toward the south, its navigation lights growing smaller against the dark sky until they disappeared entirely. He realized he didn't even know the pilot's name, just a call sign and a voice that had meant the difference between life and death. In the world of special operations, that was often enough. But back at Fob Meridian, Staff Sergeant Rodriguez was staring at his communication logs with growing confusion. According to every database, every flight manifest, and every operational order he could access, there should have been no A-10 aircraft available for close air support in his sector that night. Reaper 27 had appeared on his screen like a ghost, saved 4 lives, and then vanished back into whatever shadows had spawned her. Rodriguez pulled up the pilot roster for every squadron within 500 miles of his position. The call sign Reaper 27 appeared nowhere in any official documentation. Captain Lysander Reaper Thorne shut down her A-10's engines on the flight line at Bagram Air Base as the first light of dawn painted the Afghan mountains in shades of gold and pink. The aircraft she climbed down from bore the scars of hard use, paint worn thin by desert sand, patches where shrapnel had been repaired, and the distinctive nose art that marked it as an aircraft that had seen real combat. Thorne pulled off her helmet and shook out shoulder-length auburn hair that had been compressed by hours of flight gear. Her face showed the marks of someone who had been flying combat missions for longer than most people in the Air Force, with the kind of calm competence that came from surviving situations that would break less experienced pilots. At 32, she was older than most captains, a fact that had everything to do with a career that had taken several unconventional turns. Her crew chief, Master Sergeant Williams, was already conducting the post-flight inspection as Thorne completed her shutdown checklist. Williams had been maintaining A-10s for 15 years, and he could read the signs of a combat mission in the way an aircraft landed, the temperature of its systems, the smell of cordite that clung to the gun system after firing. "How'd she do tonight, Captain?" Williams asked as he examined the GAU-8 cannon for signs of wear. The brass casings scattered around the aircraft told their own story of the night's work. "She performed perfectly, as always," Thorne replied, signing off on the maintenance log with the kind of attention to detail that kept aircraft flying and pilots alive. "We had some work to do tonight, nothing she couldn't handle." Williams nodded, understanding that pilots rarely talked about the specifics of their missions, especially the kinds of missions that resulted in empty brass casings and the smell of burned gunpowder. He'd seen enough combat deployments to know that some nights were more eventful than others, and this had clearly been one of the eventful ones. As Thorne walked across the flight line toward the operations building, she passed rows of aircraft that represented the full spectrum of American air power. F-16 Fighting Falcons, Apache gunships, C-130 transports, and scattered among them, the distinctive profiles of A-10 Warthogs. But her aircraft was parked in a section of the flight line that seemed somehow separate from the others, maintained by a crew that answered to different chains of command and flew missions that appeared on no official schedules. The truth was that Captain Thorne and her A-10 existed in one of the military's gray areas, a special operations aviation unit that provided close air support for missions that required absolute deniability and complete operational flexibility. Her squadron answered directly to JSOC, Joint Special Operations Command, and their aircraft bore no squadron markings, no unit identifiers, and no documentation that would tie them to any particular base or mission. In the Tactical Operations Center back at Fob Meridian, Staff Sergeant Rodriguez was still trying to solve the mystery of Reaper 27's sudden appearance and equally sudden disappearance from his tracking systems. Rodriguez had spent the past 3 hours calling every Air Operations Center, every Squadron Operations Desk, and every flight coordination office within his area of responsibility. The answer was always the same: No A-10 aircraft had been scheduled for operations in his sector. No pilot with the call sign Reaper 27 appeared on any flight roster, and no mission involving close air support for Bravo team appeared in any official logs. Yet Rodriguez had the radio recordings, the infrared footage from ground sensors, and the testimony of 4 SEALs who insisted that an A-10 pilot had saved their lives. The evidence was undeniable, but it existed in direct contradiction to every official record he could access. His commanding officer, Lieutenant Colonel Sarah Martinez, found Rodriguez hunched over his computer terminal as the morning shift began to filter into the operations center. Martinez had been running tactical operations for Special Forces units for 8 years, and she'd seen enough unusual situations to know that sometimes the most important missions were the ones that officially never happened. "Rodriguez, what's got you looking like you've seen a ghost?" Martinez asked as she poured herself coffee from the perpetually brewing pot that kept the night shift functioning. Rodriguez looked up from his screen with the kind of confusion that suggested he wasn't sure whether to file a report or question his own sanity. "Ma'am, we had a close air support mission last night that saved Bravo team from being overrun. Single A-10, call sign Reaper 27, appeared out of nowhere and neutralized multiple targets with textbook precision." Martinez nodded, unsurprised by the tactical details. Close air support missions were routine in their sector, and A-10 pilots were known for their ability to provide exactly the kind of surgical strike capability that special operations teams required. "Sounds like good work. What's the problem?" Rodriguez gestured at his computer screen, which showed empty databases and negative search results. "The problem is that according to every system I can access, that aircraft and pilot don't exist. No flight plan, no mission order, no pilot roster entry. It's like they materialized out of thin air, saved 4 lives, and then vanished." Martinez frowned and pulled up her own command access to the operational databases. Her security clearance was significantly higher than Rodriguez's, and she had access to systems that tracked even the most classified special operations aviation assets. But when she ran her searches for Reaper 27 and the previous night's mission, she encountered the same blank responses that had been frustrating Rodriguez. "That's unusual," Martinez admitted, though her tone suggested this might not be the first time she'd encountered situations where official records didn't match operational reality. "Sometimes special operations aviation works on a different timeline than the rest of us. Could be that the paperwork hasn't caught up to the mission yet." But privately, Martinez wondered if there might be more to this story than administrative delays. The mystery of Reaper 27 might have remained buried in the classified files of FOB Meridian's Tactical Operations Center, but fate had different plans. 3 days after the rescue of Bravo team, another SEAL unit found themselves in almost identical circumstances in a valley 30 miles east of the original contact. Echo team had been conducting surveillance on a suspected bomb-making facility when they triggered what appeared to be another carefully planned ambush. 4 operators found themselves pinned down by superior numbers in terrain that offered minimal cover and limited escape routes. Once again, all available air support assets were either committed to other missions or unavailable due to maintenance issues. And once again, as the tactical situation deteriorated and ammunition began to run low, a single A-10 appeared on the radar screens at FOB Meridian with the call sign Reaper 27. Staff Sergeant Rodriguez was on duty again when the emergency call came in from Echo team, and this time he was ready for the mystery aircraft that seemed to materialize whenever special operations teams found themselves in desperate need of close air support. He had prepared additional tracking software, backup communication logs, and even a digital camera pointed at his radar screen to document the appearance of the ghost. "FOB Meridian, this is Reaper 27, came the now familiar voice over the radio. "Single ship A-10C, full combat load. available for immediate close air support. Rodriguez keyed his microphone with hands that trembled slightly from a combination of anticipation and professional urgency. Reaper 27, Fob Meridian. We have another team in contact. Similar situation to 3 days ago. I'm handing you off to Echo Actual on the ground control frequency. Copy Fob Meridian. Reaper 27 switching to ground control, came Thorne's reply, though Rodriguez still didn't know the pilot's name or background. What followed was a repeat performance of surgical precision and tactical excellence. Captain Thorne's A-10 arrived over the contact area and systematically neutralized every enemy position that threatened Echo Team. Her gun runs were textbook examples of close air support. Her missile strikes eliminated hardened targets with devastating efficiency, and her tactical coordination with the ground team demonstrated the kind of seamless integration that usually took months of training to achieve. When the smoke cleared and Echo Team was safely aboard their extraction helicopter, Rodriguez had documented every aspect of the mission with the thoroughness of a detective investigating a crime scene. But when he reviewed his data, the results were even more puzzling than before. His radar showed the A-10 approaching from the south, conducting its mission, and then departing toward the northwest. But the aircraft's identifier seemed to shift and change throughout the mission, sometimes appearing as Reaper 27 and sometimes disappearing from his screen entirely, only to reappear minutes later in a completely different location. The radio recordings captured Thorne's voice clearly, but background analysis suggested the transmission was being somehow masked or filtered through systems that Rodriguez didn't recognize. Most mysteriously, when Rodriguez attempted to track the A-10's departure route using long-range radar installations throughout the region, the aircraft seemed to simply vanish from all detection systems approximately 50 miles northwest of the contact area. It didn't land at any known airfield, didn't appear on any flight control radar, and left no electronic signature that would indicate where it had gone. Lieutenant Colonel Martinez reviewed Rodriguez's documentation with growing interest and concern. 2 identical rescue missions, conducted by the same mysterious pilot, with no official record of either aircraft or aviator existing in any system she could access. Her years of experience with special operations had taught her to recognize the signs of black programs, highly classified operations that existed outside normal military channels. But even black programs left some kind of paper trail for commanders with her level of security clearance. The complete absence of any documentation regarding Reaper 27 suggested something even more secretive than the usual special access programs. Martinez made a decision that would ultimately unravel the mystery of the ghost A-10 and its enigmatic pilot. She picked up her secure telephone and dialed a number that connected directly to the Pentagon, to an office that specialized in tracking special operations aviation assets that other people weren't supposed to know about. The conversation that followed would set in motion a chain of events that would eventually bring Captain Lysander Thorne face to face with the consequences of her unauthorized rescue missions and force her to confront a past that she had spent years trying to leave behind. But that confrontation was still days away, and for now, Thorne continued to fly her solitary missions from Bagram Air Base, unaware that her carefully maintained anonymity was beginning to unravel. In her quarters at Bagram, Thorne sat on the edge of her narrow bunk and cleaned her sidearm with the methodical precision that characterized everything she did. The Beretta M9 pistol had seen as much combat as she had, and maintaining it was both a practical necessity and a meditative ritual that helped her process the stress of combat flying. On the small table beside her bunk sat a photograph that she carried with her on every deployment: 4 people in military flight suits standing in front of an A-10 Warthog. The aircraft in the photograph bore the distinctive nose art and squadron markings of the 354th Fighter Squadron, and the 4 pilots appeared to be celebrating some kind of achievement or milestone. Thorne's face in the photograph was younger, more optimistic, unmarked by the years of solitary flying that had followed. The other three faces belonged to pilots who had been her closest friends, her wingmen, her chosen family in the way that only combat aviators could understand. But those three faces now existed only in photographs and memories, casualties of a mission that had gone wrong in ways that still haunted Thorne's dreams. The mission that had ended her official career with the 354th Fighter Squadron and begun her association with the shadowy Special Operations Unit that now employed her services had taken place over the skis of Syria 3 years earlier. 4 A-10s had been tasked with providing close air support for a joint special operations raid on a suspected chemical weapons facility. The intelligence had been wrong, the tactical situation had deteriorated rapidly, and by the time the smoke cleared, only one aircraft had made it back to base. Thorne had been the sole survivor, the only pilot who had managed to navigate through a gauntlet of surface-to-air missiles and enemy fighters to bring her damaged A-10 home. The official investigation had cleared her of any responsibility for the loss of her squadron mates, but the guilt and the questions had followed her anyway. How had she survived when three better pilots had been shot down? What had she done differently? What could she have done to save them? The answer, she had eventually realized, was nothing. Sometimes survival was just a matter of being in the right place when the missiles started flying, making the right turn when the enemy fighters appeared, having the right angle of attack when the surface-to-air systems locked on. But understanding the randomness of combat didn't make the guilt any easier to bear. After the official investigation concluded, Thorne had been offered a transfer to any unit she wanted, any assignment that would help her rebuild her career and put the tragedy behind her. Instead, she had requested assignment to the most dangerous, most isolated posting available, flying solo missions for Joint Special Operations Command, providing close air support for operations that officially didn't exist in teams that couldn't rely on conventional aviation assets. It was penance, in a way, and also a form of redemption. Every successful mission, every team she brought home safely, every time she managed to be in the right place at the right moment to make a difference, it was her way of balancing the scales for the three pilots she hadn't been able to save. But as Thorne cleaned her pistol and prepared for another night of restless sleep, she had no way of knowing that her carefully constructed anonymity was about to be shattered by the very success of her recent rescue missions. The inquiries that Lieutenant Colonel Martinez had initiated were working their way through channels that would eventually lead to people who knew exactly who Reaper 27 was and why she was flying unauthorized missions to save special operations teams. The reckoning that was coming would force Thorne to confront not just her past, but also her future, and to decide whether the solitary path she had chosen was really serving anyone's interests, including her own. Meanwhile, in offices scattered across multiple time zones, secure phones were beginning to ring as the mystery of the ghost A-10 attracted the attention of people whose job it was to monitor such anomalies. The story of Reaper 27 was about to become much more complicated than a simple case of unscheduled close air support. The call that would change everything came at 3:47 hours on a Tuesday morning, delivered through encrypted channels to the quarters of Colonel James Mitchell at MacDill Air Force Base in Florida. Mitchell commanded the 24th Special Operations Wing's most classified aviation detachment, a unit so secret that its existence was known only to a handful of people with cosmic-level security clearances. Mitchell had been awakened by similar calls before, situations where his unit's activities had attracted unwanted attention, or where operational security had been compromised in ways that required immediate damage control. But this call was different, carrying with it the potential for catastrophic exposure of programs that had taken decades to develop and deploy. "Sir, we have a problem with one of our assets," came the voice of Major Patricia Hayes, Mitchell's deputy commander and the officer responsible for monitoring the operational status of their most sensitive pilots. Reaper 2-7 has been conducting unauthorized close air support missions in Afghanistan. 2 confirmed rescues of special operations teams, both successful, but completely outside any approved tasking. Mitchell sat up in bed, his mind immediately shifting into crisis management mode. Reaper 2-7 was Captain Lysander Thorne, one of his most valuable and most troubled pilots. Thorne's psychological profile showed all the classic markers of survivor guilt combined with an almost pathological need to prove herself in combat situations. She was also one of the most skilled close air support pilots he had ever worked with, capable of surgical precision under the most demanding circumstances. "What kind of exposure are we looking at?" Mitchell asked, already calculating the potential damage to his unit's operational security. The 24th Special Operations Wing's classified detachment operated under such deep cover that most of the Air Force didn't know it existed. Their pilots flew missions that appeared nowhere in official records, conducted operations that were deniable even to congressional oversight committees, and maintained a level of operational flexibility that conventional units could never achieve. Hayes consulted her tablet, which contained the preliminary investigation results that had been forwarded from FOB Meridian through multiple classified channels. 2 FOBs have documented radio contact and radar tracking of an A-10 that appeared without authorization, conducted close air support missions with extreme effectiveness, and then disappeared without any record of landing at authorized facilities. The tactical operations centers are asking questions that we can't answer without compromising the entire program. Mitchell felt the familiar weight of command decisions that had no good solutions. Thorne's unauthorized missions had saved 8 American lives, 4 SEALs on each rescue, but they had also exposed a classified program that depended on complete deniability for its effectiveness. If conventional military investigators started digging into the mystery,